So now we're on Daf Samach Beis Omid Beis. Poslim Mechatos. So when we're talking about birds, and as a general rule, we're assuming that these birds, while they drink, they dribble some of that water into the receptacle. That's called nature Maseches, right? Motzetz, chutz min hayonos mipnei shemotzet all of them dribble back into that receptacle, with the exception of a yona, because a yona is described as a motzetzes. Motzetzes means somehow it sucks up the water. Nothing dribbles back into the v'im isa. And now, if you're telling me that a tassel is a type of a yona, is listening chutz mi yona v'tasil, why doesn't it appear there? Omar Rabbi Zera, you think that you think that ipso facto, because the tasil is a yona, therefore it could be described as a water sucker that doesn't dribble back into the vessel. No. Ze motze umeki, vize motze v'eno meki. With regard to the pigeon, it does not expel any of the water. It doesn't allow the water to dribble out of its mouth, which would possibly. But in the case of the tassel, even though it's a pigeon, nevertheless, it sucks up water and expels some of the water, and if the water is possible for a par. Rabbi Yehuda, Hani Kushfane Tzutzasne Sherim Lagabi Mizbeah. Now, apparently, the word kufshane is identical with the tar, with the torin. And a tar, as we said, is a bird that can be brought on the mizbeah. Now we have another word as an adjective to describe this kind of tar. It's called tzutzaine. Now, tzutzaine seems to be a name of a place, a locale, and that's where these birds would frequent. And as we said before, kufshane is Aramaic for torin. And Rabbi Yehuda tells us that these are ksherim legabi mizbeach, even though you have another name for it. It's not called torin. It's called torin tzutzisni. Meisvei, I'm going to prove to you from a different area of halacha. We're going to stretch our arm out into a different area of halacha called azov, which is a hyssop tree that's used in the process of purifying a mitzora, or, for that matter, a tamei mess. The sprinkling of the chatas water on a person or a utensil that contracted tumas mess is done with an azov. Like they take the azov and they dip it into the waters, the mechatas. He points out here that they used also this hyssop when they went at him. It's on Leil Makas Mardus. They applied it, to the doorposts. Anyway, the blood to the tomb. Azov velo Azov yon, whatever that is, velo Azov kochli, whatever that is, velo Azov romi, whatever that is, velo midbari, velo Azov sheyesh lo shem levai. What's common to all these categories of an Azov is that they have an adjective that's attached to their name, and therefore they're disqualified as an Azov. And let's apply the same logic to a tar. If the tar is a tzutzione tzar, then it's not a tar, as far as we're concerned, and therefore cannot be used for the mizbeach as a tar. Amar Abaye, it depends what was the name of this bird at the time of Matan Torah. The fact that you add an adjective and change the name after Matan Torah, says Abaye, is totally irrelevant. Abaye called Shishnanishmo Kodim Matan Torah, Vikpida Torah, love the Torah, was aware of the fact that there was a Shem Levi, and yet the Torah calls it by its original short-formed abbreviated name without the Levi. It's Yeshol Shem Levi Apostle. Then I cannot identify it with that which is written in the Bible, in the scriptures. But in the case of the Tzutzina Torin, Lo Nishtadishmam Kodem Matan Torah, the addition of the locale as a tag on to its name took place after Matan Torah. So already at the time of Matan Torah, it was included in the word Tar, and that status is there forever. But Rava gives a different answer. Hani kufshoni tzutzaina basrayu stoma koriluhu. No. This is not a modification of the name of the tar. It just tells you where you would find this tar. It just identifies the locale of the tar. It's not an essential adjective that describes that species. Amar Rav Yehuda. Okay, now we have a little bit of digression for just a minute to grasshoppers, chagovim, and then we'll come right back to birds. Hani kroze de bechilfi sharu. Okay, there are certain grasshoppers that are found in the rushes, which means not in the vegetable itself. These grasshoppers don't inhabit the vegetables, but they're out there amongst the rushes, and they are kosher. However, the bay, krave, those that are constantly habiting the cabbage, is the vegetables, they're asir. Omar Avina, now that you've told me that these grasshoppers that are in the rush are tmeim, therefore if somebody eats that grasshopper, he gets malchus. Umalkin alay mishum sheretz ha'of. The Torah says in Dvarim Perek Yudalid Parshas Re'eh, it says v'chol sheretz ha'of tamehu lachem lo ye'achel. So this kind of a sheretz has two characteristics. Number one, it creeps on the ground, and number two, it flies in the air. And that's this grasshopper that you find in the cabbage. It swarms on the ground, but it also flies up in the air. And now we know that for sure, says Ravina, this grasshopper in the cabbage patches is definitely bevadai non-kosher, and therefore you get malchus for eating it. Personally, I would recommend not eating any grasshoppers, unless you're a Yemenite. Anyway, I don't think there are too many Yemenites, by the way, who eat grasshoppers. Okay, Rabosa, we're back to birds. And from now till the end of the daf, for the most part, I don't know what's going on because I don't know how to identify these birds. And Rashi seems to indicate that nobody knows how to identify these birds. Rabbi Yehuda Tzrada Shari Barda Osir. Notice the similarity in the names, but we have to differentiate because the Tzrara bird is permitted, the Barda bird is non-kosher, v'simonech, and you need a memory device. Bar mineh, right? The word bar means excluded. It's on the outside, like a brisa was left out of the Mishnah. And this is a bar da, not a bardak, but a bar da. And the bar da is left out, meaning we cannot eat the bar da. Then Rabbi Yehuda adds marda, which is again very similar to barda, sfeika. We don't know whether it's a kosher bird or a non-kosher bird. Omer of Asi, Shmonas Fekosheim. Marda is one particular bird that's a suffix. We don't know if it's tar or tame, that appears in Rav Asi's list of 8. And what are these 8? Chuva, Chuga, Suga, Harnuga, Tushlami, Umarda, right? Marda was the one that Rav Yehuda mentioned earlier. Kochilna, Ubar Nafcha, and Maisve Kayu. Why are these 8 species of birds in this doubt? And the answer is because Ophos Taharm Kukava Niklaf. You can get by hand, you can peel off the membrane that covers the gizzard. And that's true for all the birds except for these 8. Tmeim ein kurvasa niklav. Vahani, and these 8 kurvasa niklav is sakin. You could only successfully remove the peel off the membrane that covers the gizzard with a knife. You can't do it by hand. Now Rashi points out that these 8 birds have 3 kosher simonim. Right? They have the crop, the zefek, they have the extra toe. They're not dorsim. But the problem is, do they have a peelable gizzard? And that's what we don't know. Frekte Gemara, v'ha hi bar arv zodahavi be Mar Shmuel. Mar Shmuel kept a young duck in his house. Deloavi kom miklav kurkavana, and the gizzard could not be peeled. So what did Shmuel do? Kevan osve b'shimsha. He placed the duck in the sunlight. It came in the roughy, it got soft from the sun, and Iklif, he was able to peel it. So why don't you take these 8 birds that have unpeelable gizzards and just put them in the sun, like Mar Shmuel did? Amar Abaye. Oh, I skipped something. Hasam. Bei Rafi Iklif Biyadi. In the case of the duck of Mar Shmuel, after they put it in the sunlight and it got a nice suntan, and then they were able to remove the peel off the gizzard with the hands. But in the other 8 sfekos, after you put them in the sun, you would still need a knife to peel them off. Omar Abaye. Okay, now we're going to differentiate between male chickens and female hens. Tarnagola di Agma. Agam is a swamp, and there's a certain kind of a tarnagol, which is a male, I guess you'd call it technically a cock, that lives and inhabits the swamp areas, is one of the 8 sfekos v'hani mardo. So if you recall, we spoke about mardo before. We identified it as one of the questionable ophos, and now we're limiting it, according to Abaye, to dafka the tarnagola the agma. Omer of Papa, however, what about the female? Tarnagol the agmasir, but tarnagolta, notice tarnagolta with an extra tough, because now we're referring to a hen, a female, the agma, sharia. She you can eat. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the same bird and we're saying that the male is Tomei and the female is Tahor? No, 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 no. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about two different species. There's a species called the Tarnagola de Agma, and then there's a species called the Tarnagola de Agma. I'm sorry, a Tarnagolta de Agma. In the case of the Tarnagolta de Agma, you're allowed to eat either the female or the male. In the case of a Tarnagola de Agma, you can't eat neither the male nor the female. But how do you remember which of the two species is the kosher species? The Simonech Amoni v'lo Amonis, we could probably add Mo'avi v'lo Mo'avis, that the Torah prohibited the male of Ammon to marry into the Jewish people, but not the female. So again, keep in mind, what we're talking about is a species that's called Tarnagolta di Agma, and in such a case, you can eat either the male or the female, and that's your Simon v'lo Amonis. Dorash Meremar, Tarnagola di Agma Asira, Chazua di Dorsa v'yochla. I got a bad piece of news for you, says Meremar. We checked out the species, which is called Tarnagolta di Agma, and guess what? It was a Dores. Now the Gemara concludes by saying V'hainu Gerusa, right? If we go back to the list of Rav Asi's 8, we have Gerusa, I think. No, maybe not. 1 second, maybe I'm making a mistake. No. My mistake. It's not on the list. Anyway, what do I want to point out here? You're eating a bird, and you have every right to assume that it's a kosher bird. And sometimes later, chronologically later, they find out that this bird is a dores, it's a treifa bird. So I'm trying to figure out whether or not they were guilty Do you remember we had at the beginning here on Amud Aleph a story which actually repeated itself twice, in which Mar Zutra says that, just 1 second, was it Mar Zutra? Just 1 second. No, not Mar Zutra. Just 1 second. Rav Nachman, I think it was. No. Oh, Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer with regard to the Zarzir. And another girsa in Rabbi Eliezer was the Snunis Levon. And Rabbi Eliezer was not impressed with the fact that they were eating it in these different places. And he said, Asidim Lases Asadin. Now, presumably, they had every right to assume that these birds were kosher. See, what I'm trying to figure out, I don't know, Rabosa, if you're interested in this thought that crosses my mind. How does it work when we find out that the oath that we assumed was kosher was really an oath tameh? Does it work l'mafreya retroactively? And anyone who ate from this oath ate an oath tameh. L'chora, that's what we're saying here in Rabbi Eliezer with regard to the zarzur and the snapir alavana. Asirim litenes did. I don't know. It bothers me because I have a bug in my head that if you had every reason to believe that this bird was not a dores and it was never observed to be a dores, nobody observed it as a dores. So why are you punishable when they find out that, oh, we found this kind of a bird and it belongs to that species and it was a dores? I mean, the Torah says these are the simanim, these are the kosher birds, these are the non-kosher birds. So you did everything in your power to establish that this is a kosher bird. If you want to tell me Mikano Lahaba, that from the point of time and onwards, the point in which we find that it's a non-kosher bird and onwards it's not kosher, that I can understand. But as far as yesterday or yesteryear is concerned, it was a kosher bird. When a bird exhibits a behavior pattern that indicates that it's a non-kosher bird, like a dores, okay, now we're going to establish it as a non-kosher bird. But until that time, I would say it was a kosher bird. I don't know. Let's just finish up the Omar Rav, Shavur and Parter Shor, Piruz and Darter Os. The Simonech Peruz Rasha, there was a very well-known wicked person named Peruz. He was wanted dead or alive. Remember that? Omar Avhuna, Bunya Shori, Parva Os, the Simonech Parva Amgusha. Parva, by the way, there's a chamber in the Beis Hamikdash called the Beis HaParva that's named after him, but in fact he was a Baal Tshuva. He was a sorcerer. Again, it's a little bit strange that we remember his name when he was a sorcerer. Now he's a Baal Tshuva. We don't usually remind a person of what he was like before he did Tshuva. Omar Rav Papa, Mardu Zogid V'Achil Shari. There's a Mardu, and if you want to know how to identify him or her, right, it stands erect and eats, and it's an oath tameh, tahar. It's permissible. But sagid v'achel, but if it bows down and eats, then you know it belongs to a different species, and it's awesome. V'simonech lo tishtach v'le'el zar. We don't believe in bowing down to an alien odd. Amar Shmuel, Shasya Chamra Sira. There's a bird that's called a wine drinker. I don't know why they called it that. V'simonech, and if you want to remember not to eat that bird because it's a treifa bird, is Shsuya Yaim Psul Lavoda, that a Kohen who drinks wine can no longer be valid and fit for a temple service. V'yamar Shmuel Mazga Chamra Asira, even though the wine mixer, a bird, is prohibited, but the daughter, which is again not the daughter, but a bas mozga chamra sharia. There's another species of bird that apparently is a little bit similar, but it's called a bas mazga chamra, and that you're allowed to eat. Simonech Yafa kocha ben mikocha av. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, and with this we'll conclude, shkitna. Okay, there are three different types of shkitna birds. One is ariche, shaki, vesumke. It's got long legs and it's red in color. Shario, you're allowed to eat it. The simonech murzama. Again, I don't know, somehow they identified murzama as a well-known bird and it was kosher. Guze vesumke, but if it's got short legs and sumke means it's red, asire is forbidden. The simonech nanos posel. A dwarf Kohen is excluded from avoda. Ariche shake viroke asire, and a shkita that has long legs and it's yellow is a treifa bird. Simonech Yerukim Psulim, right? We spoke about if the innards of the animal turn green, then you know that it's treif. And that's going to be your simon, your mnemonic device to remember that if you have a shkitna bird that has long legs and is yellow, then it's forbidden. And this leads us to Rabbi Yehuda, which Amir Hashem, what day of the week is tomorrow? I lost my count. Wednesday at noontime tomorrow, correct? Okay, then have a great day and nice to resume.